is we're gonna, oh, thank you. We're gonna, potentially, not you, not taking personally, um, maybe cuts of faculty budgets. How is California gonna like secure its budget? I know Jerry Brown's been pretty good at it, and not just help maintain what the CSUs and the UCs need, but to give them really the money that they need to like not just facilitate, but give great higher education. And this is going to be a thing every 4 years or 5 years that it's going to be on the ballot, like to give education, or are we going to have a real like balance, a real budget for education long term?
Great. No, very good question. So I think that the best thing to shed some light on is your question it impacts two budget discussions. One is the budget for higher education in California, whether it's the UC, the CSU, or even the community colleges for that matter, but we're at a CSU, so let's just talk about the CSU. CSU has several sources of funding, but the three biggest are tuition. I know you don't like to hear that, but it's true. The numbers are what they are. The state budget, right? How much does the legislature and the governor appropriate to the CSU system? But there's external sources of funding too. The UC more so than the CSU, but the CSU also gets a lot of federal grants for a variety of things. So stabilizing the CSU budget overall is a broader discussion than just, well, how much is coming from the state budget? But it's one of the pillars of it. So that's why it's pointed to when Prop 30, now Prop 55, was on the ballot. So to fight for that, you got to engage in the other budget discussion, which is when the legislature and the governor are negotiating a budget, it's not just, well, how much should we give to the UC-CSU? It starts with how much do we have to work with as a reflection of the economy. And yes, higher education is a priority, but so is K-12, and so is public safety, and so is infrastructure. So is healthcare in an era when millions of Californians could potentially lose healthcare if at the federal level they start repealing Obamacare or sections of it. So the state budget process is also a big balancing act too of not just money but priorities and how we want to treat Californians and what we value. So obviously education is critically important, but when we invest in infrastructure and other economic strategies, the better the economy does, the better the budget does, the better we can write checks to the CSU, and the better the higher education system is. So it's all sort of interconnected. But there's nothing like advocacy, man. So keep speaking up, keep fighting, keep organizing, not just to vote on election day, but that's a great example. Between elections, there's a lot to do too. It's not just, well, I voted for Prop 55, so come talk to me in 2 or 4 years. Or I voted for the president or governor, I'll see you in 2 or 4 years. No. Being involved politically means day in, day out, what are we speaking up for and what are we advocating for? So obviously funding for higher education needs to stay at the top. Yes.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Rudy Cáceres. I'm from Chicano Studies here and a neighboring city of yours, San Fernando. Marijuana was just passed in California, and we know that there's been many who have lost their voting privileges because of felonies and things like that. Can we look to California to kind of do anything to return voting rights for people with felons?
Yes, great question, because I think there's a lot of misinformation or misperception that's out there when it comes to voting rights. California is actually on the more progressive end in this area. The law in California is pretty clear. To be able to register and to be able to vote, you have to be 18 years or older and a citizen. Very few things can take your voting rights away. One of them, the main one, is if you are in state prison or on parole for a felony conviction, your voting rights are lost. But when your time served is done, when parole is completed, your voting rights are restored, right? Unlike a lot of other states where once you lose your voting rights, it's permanent, or you have to petition the governor and they just say no 99% of the time. In California, your rights are automatically restored, and a lot of people don't know that part. So you got to help us spread the word. And there's also a big difference between being in state prison versus being in county jail. Big difference between being on parole versus being on probation. Again, the law is if you're in state prison or on parole for a felony conviction, your voting rights are suspended. If it's a misdemeanor we're talking about, if it's probation we're talking about, you have the right to still be registered to vote and to vote. But not enough people are aware of that fact. So help us spread the word.
Well, my name is Madeline. I'm a student from Roosevelt. And what I wanted to ask was, is there anything we should tell the students that still want to protest that aren't happy with Donald Trump?
Yeah, look, protesting is good. But we also have to channel that energy, not just to raise awareness and raise attention, but how do we channel it to lay the groundwork for ongoing good results or even better results in our community in 2 years from now and in 4 years from now? Look, politicians are people too, right? So I'm going to share something with you just from a very human, personal standpoint. I mentioned I've been on this emotional roller coaster, right? So there's days in this last week that I wake up and I'm still in shock, or, by the time I have a cup of coffee, I'm like, oh man, I'm down. What's the next 4 years going to look like? And then by the afternoon, I'm upset. I'm mad. I just want to fight. I want to protest too, right? And shouting something in our signs and marching, that's good, that's healthy, but it can't end there. That's what I'm talking about. How do we channel that energy towards something that's really going to move the needle? Here's what's really frustrating for me. As a Californian, as California Secretary of State, California didn't vote for Donald Trump, not by a lot. He lost in California by 3 million votes. We did our part. Record registration, record turnout. But still, we're part of the United States of America, and he's the president-elect. And some people say, including President Obama, hey, we don't like the outcome of the election, but we've got to respect the office. It's American, it's patriotic to respect the office, not by saying yes and agreeing with everything that may come out of that office. It's equally American and patriotic that when you disagree, you speak up. When I heard last Thursday that he had named to his transition team and is now considering for Attorney General of the United States, my counterpart from the state of Kansas, Chris Kobach, who, if you do your research on him, has worked for groups identified as hate groups by the Southern Policy Law, yeah, exactly. Or brags that he was the visionary and the architect of AB 1070 in Arizona and gave Trump the idea to build a wall, and you put him on your transition team to lead immigration recommendations and maybe appoint him to Attorney General, you're right, we have to speak up. And so I'm protesting in my own ways too. And so that's what I meant in my speech when I say we got to call him on it every step of the way. So yes, keep protesting, keep marching, but let's also keep dialoguing and organizing and channeling that energy.
Hello, I'm Nick Lloyd. I'm a student here. As you probably know, 1.2 million more people in the country at least voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Trump. So this is the second time in the last 16 years that the Electoral College system is giving the presidency to the person who had fewer popular votes. I've heard, some ideas are of course, scrapping the whole Electoral College system is a simple solution, but a difficult one probably. Proportional representation in each state is something that would have to be done in probably across each state because it is such a state-by-state governed system in our Constitution. But there are some things that California, I believe, can do, like petitioning, having the winner take all if system be modified, at least in some states. If it was done across the nation, I think that would be one solution, going in each state of going to the popular vote in the whole country. The elector is another solution. More radical solution is even breaking up the California into multiple states so we get more representation in the Electoral College and in the Senate and in Congress, because in the Electoral College system, we only have, as you know, 55 Electoral College votes, when if we had the same representation that we have in, as small states have, we would have a proportional of up to 190 Electoral College votes, which would trump, if you will, the presidency. And give the a fair proportional representation to, and make this closer to a democracy, which I believe if this continues to happen, again, which twice in the last 16 years, I think it's going to be very bad for this democracy, for people to believe that we are a democracy.
Yeah.
So what solutions do you think should be proposed and put forward for the people and electoral leaders?
So look, you're right, and the topic is front and center in a lot of circles across the country. Our own Senator Boxer introduced federal legislation just yesterday, I believe, to undo the Electoral College. So again, academically, just change the Constitution, right? We can have that discussion. This is public affairs. Like what's realistic? What's maybe doable in the real world here? Well, we did find one workaround that was referenced earlier in the day. When I was in the Senate, I voted on a resolution that went through the legislature that adds California to a list of small but growing numbers of states that are committed to a compact that when enough states that represent a majority of the Electoral College votes ultimately agree, then in the following presidential elections, we will award our electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote nationally, right? So it's sort of an end around to changing the Constitution and determining who becomes president of the United States. So that's one tangible action that we can take, that we have taken. When we'll get the critical mass of states to put that into effect, I'm not so sure. Yes, we passed that through the legislature about 5 years ago, I want to say. I was still in the legislature at the time. So there's those sorts of things. But the other part of the political practicality of it is, Donald Trump's not going to go into the White House and saying he has a clear and convincing mandate to just run roughshod over X, Y, or Z because he was elected, because it may not have legal or constitutional standing, but the fact that he lost the national popular vote undermines that political capital or political clout. So there's the non-tangibles at play here too. Yes.
You have a question?
Last question, and then last one up front here.
Thank you. A gentleman mentioned what steps California was going to take to bring back voting rights to those that have been basically charged with abuse of marijuana. My question is similar to that. It's more of whenever someone applies to a job, it always asks them if they have been committed of any felonies or nonviolent. Well, now it's considered a nonviolent crime, but now that it's legal, are we going to be doing anything for that situation so they don't have to exactly put down that they were charged with that? And then also in the housing situation, a lot of apartments or a lot of houses ask if you know anybody or if you have been convicted of a felony. And personally, that has affected me because my family tends to take in cousins and all that, and they do have a history of that. And we've been kicked out from multiple houses or multiple apartments, and that's kind of something that I want to see resolved now that we legalized marijuana.
So two-part answer. Even before the recreational marijuana measure was passed last Tuesday, California was already on this movement of ban the box, right? That's what we call it. Can't ask that in the employment application, at least not up front. If somebody's offered a job or is on their second or third interview and it comes up in conversation later, that's one thing. But to just discount an application because somebody checked that box is no longer the practice. But the marijuana question specifically, that's kind of what happens when laws change. Now you got to figure out, okay, what other areas of the laws are impacted here, and how do we reconcile or conform other rights, laws, opportunities, or lack thereof as what's legal versus what's not legal is changing. So one of the reasons why, even though the measure passed last Tuesday, it doesn't go into effect until 2018, because that's what the state public policy folks are going to be doing over the course of the next year. What other areas of the law are affected here that we need to reconcile because it's now legal? You can't get in trouble for something that was illegal 5 years ago but isn't legal anymore today. Yes, last question.
Thank you.
The lady in the power red.
Thank you very much. Thank you for what you're doing, Secretary Padilla, for making voter participation better in our state. When you consider going to county-wide, I don't know what the history, the law, can you bring polling places to community college campuses and university campuses so that we can have more younger voters, easier to vote, and a greater turnout?
So the answer is yes, and I think I have some good news for you. So one of the main bill that I sponsored this year that was signed by the governor and it will begin to take effect starting in 2018. Now, it's not a mandate, but it affords every county in California the option of either doing the elections the way they've been doing it for a long time, right? You go to your polling place on election day, or you can vote by mail. That's pretty convenient. And more than 60% of Californians now vote by mail. Or counties can migrate to a new way of conducting elections that's based on not just good ideas, but best practices that I've seen across the country. And LA County may not do it in 2018, but either 2020 or 2022, elections, this is how they're going to look in LA and beyond. Every voter will automatically get their ballot in the mail. You don't have to ask for it. You don't have to sign up. It just automatically comes to you. When Oregon and Washington made this shift, their turnout went way up, because how easier can it be than doing it in your own living room, your own kitchen, or whatever the case may be. But it's not just about sending everybody their ballot. You create options for how people can cast that ballot. You want to mail it back because you still buy stamps? Great, you can do that. But every county that moves to this new format would also be required to set up what are known as ballot drop boxes throughout the county. So they're kind of like a mailbox, but clearly marked different for ballots only. And you can drop your ballot anywhere that's convenient to you over the course of those 4 weeks leading up to Election Day. But it gets better, because not everybody likes to just send the ballot back. I know my mom doesn't want to vote by mail. She wants to go in person because she wants to see the ballot go into the box. And I think she has the right. 40% of Californians still go in person, but we can modernize polling places as we know them today to what are known as vote centers. And here's a couple key differences. Colorado is probably the closest thing that's already been in place for a few years now. When we go to vote in person, you have to go to your designated polling place. Why? Because they look you up on this big book and they make sure, your name, your address, and you got to sign here. What if instead of those ledgers that they had laptops and tablets? Right? It's not revolutionary, but what if they can look you up electronically? What we do with technology is enable each location to have access not just to the list of voters in that community, but to the list of voters for the whole county. So that means any voter can go anywhere in the county to go vote if they didn't vote by mail or drop their ballot off already. And these vote centers aren't just open on Election Day. Senate Bill 450 calls for them to be open for at least 10 days up to and including Election Day. So now we're working with a couple of weekends too. And under Senate Bill 450, the county has to have public hearings and get public input as to where these vote centers ought to be located. Because if we're going to have big crowds on weekends, like I saw in North Hollywood, the Saturday before Election Day, we need places that have larger facilities. Actually, this ballroom would be a perfect vote center, right? And you have access to public transportation, you have parking, you have all the things that would facilitate a vote center type activity. So community colleges are a great opportunity, CSUs, UCs, not just somebody's garage. So I think that good news is on the way in this more comprehensive way that we're going to modernize elections starting in 2018. All right? Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, I would like to thank Secretary of State Alex Padilla for spending all of this time. He's way overdue for his next event, for both informing and inspiring us, and also for what you do every single day. We are very much appreciative, and let's have him a round of applause. Thank you, Alex. We'll stay in touch. Okay. Thank you all. Don't forget one important thing that has been said, that 90% of life is showing up. And you have all shown up, and Alex Padilla is challenging you to keep showing up, and so does the Pat Brown Institute. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day.